Good morning. Today is the 28th of Tishrei. It's the 13th of October. We're up to the 6th and 7th readings of the first Parsha in the Torah. And the 6th reading ends the topic that we talked about yesterday. We'll leave that alone for now, and we'll skip directly to chapter 5, verse 1. And here we begin with the lineage of Adam. That's the way it's usually described. The translation before me is: the following is the record of the descendants of Adam. On the day that God created Adam, on the day that God created Adam, He made him in His likeness of God. He created male and female. He blessed and named them Adam on the day that they were created, or man on the day that they were created. And then it gives us the years that each one lived. Adam lived 130 years, and he had a son in his likeness and form, and he named him Seth. And he lived 800 years after he had Seth, and he had more sons and daughters. And this goes on for 10 generations until we come to Noach, the 10th generation from Adam. Now, incredibly, it's missed a lot of times that the Torah doesn't include a lot of people think there's only one account of creation, but if you spend any time learning Torah, you know that there are really two accounts. There's the one that begins chapter 1, and then there's the one that begins chapter 2, and they're very different. The account in chapter 1 is almost mystical. This happened on the first day, second day, third day, fourth day. Everything is coming out of nothingness and suddenly appearing, and it seems to be a perfect world. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it. The second account is the one that begins with God creating Adam and Eve. Well, first of all, putting Adam to sleep, bringing out Eve. We talked about that earlier in the week. And then they have two sons, and, first of all, they sin and they're cast out of the Garden of Eden. And then they have two sons, and one kills the other. Cain murders Abel. And we have the whole degradation that we talked about in the 5th reading. This is actually a third account of creation. You have to look at it this way. Chapter 5 begins a third account. And the third account is historical. It's the way that we would write history today. There was this man, his name was Adam. He lived for this amount of time, and he had these children, and so on, and these are his generations. And this is a very dry, objective picture. Now, why 3 accounts? What do we need 3 accounts for? First of all, it teaches us that every event has more than one perspective. Even the creation of the world, which you might think is something very straightforward, has many perspectives. For instance, science tries to give today its perspective on the creation of the world. First of all, that it agrees that the world is created is a big deal, because in ancient Greece, one of the tenets held by most of the philosophers was that the world was eternal, and that only the interaction between God and the world began at some point. So this is a big move forward by science. At least it thinks that the world was created at some point. But then it gives its own account. And again, it will be a very objective, scientific account. The way we need to understand these 3 accounts that the Torah gives are that they correspond to the 3 different perspectives of our intellect. The first account, which we said, describes the world coming out of nothingness, out of something that cannot be perceived, that cannot be understood. That is the perspective of wisdom. In fact, the translation of the Torah into Aramaic translates the word Bereishit in the beginning as Bechuchmeta, with wisdom. God created the world with wisdom. What do we mean by wisdom? God was smart anyway. Specifically wisdom, we mean by wisdom that there is the power of something emerging from nothingness. And that's what it captures there. And then when you focus on the first story, the first account of creation, the point is to exercise your faculty of wisdom And wisdom, as the sages say, Ezu chacham haroeh et hanolad, who is wise? He who sees that which is coming into being. That means to be wise. A wise person can see something coming out of being. He can see the nothingness from which things emerge. He can see the background from which everything is coming. The second account, the account that includes Adam and Eve's sin and Cain's murder of Abel, the degradation of mankind all the way to Noah's generation, 10 generations, actually is an account of what we call understanding, bina. Understanding is the faculty of the mind that is very open and realizes that there is an emotional realm. It's not objective at all, it's very subjective. In fact, when we read the second account, it's a very subjective account. And in the subjective account, where understanding is, there could be a lot of joy, but in this case there's a lot of harsh judgments. The emotions that emerge are all very difficult and harsh. And we have to know that that also exists in the mind. That a person can have that point of view on reality, where reality is constantly giving birth, as it were, like a mother giving birth to children, to emotions. And these emotions are many times, at least initially, shattered, broken. They need to be taken care of, they need to be nurtured. Just like when a child is born, the first thing is that you have to take care of them. They can't stand on their 2 feet yet. They can't take care of themselves. The same thing is true of all emotions. That when they first emerge, they tend to be broken. And so there is the nurturing aspect of understanding. To be understanding of things is to be able to see how they need to be nurtured, how they need to be held, how they need to be supported, how they need to be rectified. Understanding looks at the world from the point of view of its brokenness, and it has the empathy and the sympathy to put it back together. The final account that we have in today's reading corresponds to knowledge, to da'at. It's very interesting that knowledge, on the face of it, knowledge is what we call like history, like what we described before. It's just knowledge of the facts. What are the facts? And who has knowledge? Who has the ability to look at the world simply as a historical tale, as it were, as an unfolding of a process without the emotions, without the something coming out of nothing, without the, meaning it's not exciting in the sense of the first account of creation, it's not surprising in the sense of the first account of creation, and it's also not emotionally broken like the second one. It's not something that needs to be supported. It's just a story that is unfolding generation after generation after generation. That is the way that knowledge looks at things. That is the way that da'at looks at things. What kind of knowledge can see things this way? So particularly we're talking about what we call higher knowledge or supernal knowledge, da'at elyon. That's the type of knowledge that Moses had of reality. When he wrote the Torah, he saw things from God's perspective. And from God's perspective, you can chart a course through this very, very difficult and complex reality that we all experience through our wisdom and understanding. When you have higher supernal knowledge, you can look at things and actually describe them in an objective way. That this is what's happening. This is what there is. There is also lower knowledge, where you become involved, where you become conscious of the feelings of everything that's going on. But here we're talking about God's perspective, because these three accounts, obviously they were written by God because nobody else could write them. So God is telling us, I have these three perspectives. I have the perspective in which the world is a wonder. The world is, through the eyes of wisdom, a wondrous event. through the eyes of understanding, I have the compassion and the support and the empathy that's needed in order to fix what is broken. And through the knowledge, God is saying, believe me that there is a story here that is unfolding, and it has a beginning and an end. And that end is going to come eventually. It's not going to last like this forever. There's something very interesting in the Talmud that there's a sage by the name of Ben Azai, who was one of the four that went with Rabbi Akiva into the Pardes, into what they call paradise. And he says that the third account, Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam, chapter 5, verse 1, that verse is more important than the verse, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Even though everybody would say that's got to be the center of the Torah, as a potential convert came to Hillel, the elder, and told him, teach me the entire Torah on one foot. And he said, anything that is hated by your friend, do not, anything that is hated by you, don't do to your friend. Which was the translation, he said this in Aramaic, of the verse, love your neighbor as you love yourself, or love your friend as you love yourself. But Ben Azai says, no, this third account is actually more important. Why is it more important? What makes it more important? So the simple reason is because this is the true godly consciousness. It's the true history of the world. If you don't have a godly perspective on reality, and you're only embroiled in the difficulties and the pains and so on, then even if you do have sympathy for your neighbor and so on, in the end, you can't see beyond the moment. In the end, you don't really believe, or you can't believe, or you can't hold yourself up by understanding, support yourself, by truly understanding that there is a story unfolding here. It's not just pain and misery. It's not just things being broken and then being put back together again. That's also true. That's one of the perspectives. But the perspective that says there is a history here, that there is an objective beginning and end, there is a reason for all of this. It's going somewhere. It's not just the moment. That perspective is in a sense even more important than the day-to-day actions that one takes, because it's what holds the entire edifice up. It's the memory that this is not going to simply fall apart. There is a direction, there is a history, there is something that ties us together in the beginning and will eventually connect us all together at the end. So thank you very much for joining. Hope to see you on Sunday.